Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Anca Copaescu. I am the CEO and founder of Strategikon. And I won't say much more about me because if you signed up, you probably heard me talking about the webinar and saw my LinkedIn profile. And I have with me...
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrei Antonescu. I'm the head of product for Strategikon. And I'll be showing some of the AI stuff in the webinar today, but I'll keep it short as well. Nobody likes long intros.
Okay, so let's start by setting expectations for today's event. We are going to talk about the why, the how, and the what. The why is why AI in outsourcing, why AI in pharma. This is an educational webinar, so we're going to talk a lot about the how. How does AI work? Where is more hype than reality? What challenges are around using AI? And then we're going to go into the what, and I explained a lot about how the plan for the what is. We're going to simulate a real RFP process. We are going to unleash the clinical Maestro bot doing due diligence on the RFP, answering questions, and most importantly, we want you, audience, to be engaged with us. And that is post comments, ask us questions, say hello right now. Make sure the technology works. We want to make sure that your comments are coming through. So if you want to raise your hand, say anything in the comments box. We also want to check that here there are some comments coming through. We want to make sure that you are here live and engaged with us. So please interrupt us, ask us questions. We'll try to respond to as many as possible in today's session. So let's get started with the why. Can we have the screen up, please? Okay. So who's not talking about AI these days? And I don't mean your kids trying to do their homework on ChatGPT. There is a lot of discussion about AI in life sciences. And I can tell it myself, and many of you, I'm sure, have attended some conferences this year, starting with Scope, and many other events in US and Europe, and everybody's talking about AI. And there is a lot of hype involved because, hey, we all recall everybody was talking about DCT or was talking about blockchain or any other new technology. So there is a lot of hype in the AI discussion. We are also are well aware that there are multiple success stories and, more importantly, major initiatives underway to extract the value of AI for life sciences. And here are just some examples that we picked because you most likely are familiar with. Drug discovery and development, a subject much talked about, and very significant investments in leveraging AI to discover new molecules or discovering modes of action. A lot of discussion about site feasibility, patient recruitment. Actually, I recall at Scope, almost every company, as you were walking down the aisle, had something to do or say with applying AI in feasibility, in DCT, or in patient recruitment. And of course, predictive analytics. This is a really big area of focus where AI tends to yield significant results. So here is a question for you, Andrei. Have you seen a lot of success stories in clinical outsourcing?
Not a lot. And this is actually a good segue to the next part. I kind of left this intentional blank here, because I think, on the one hand, on drug discovery, for example, we even had a Nobel Prize, I think, with the protein folding innovation from DeepMind, from Google. But in clinical outsourcing, we're still kind of in the same old paradox, I would say, because there's a lot of data, there's huge amounts of information in various rate cards, bid grids, assumption structures, all file formats from email to PDF to Excel to Word. But in reality, it's very hard to analyze and to extract quality insights from that data. And I think one of the main reasons for this is that because everything is so unstandardized, everyone works in their own format, and we add to this, the regulatory pressure of and business pressure of getting things out faster. Drug development and clinical development specifically takes a long time. So you add all of this up together with the fear of change, then we kind of end up in the same space, unfortunately. And this is one of the main reasons why we chose to, first of all, build Clinical Maestro, as well as why we chose to focus the first AI capabilities on this subset of problems. So bid, proposal, due diligence in clinical outsourcing. So I think if we can leave for the screen for just a second, Anca, I think you had some very good talking points since you have direct experience in this area around why due diligence is painful overall, and then I can add some insights onto why I think AI can help in that area.
Yes, absolutely. I remember when I was in charge for clinical outsourcing at BioMarin Pharmaceuticals, almost 10 years ago, and that Excel spreadsheet looks like many other Excel spreadsheets that represent a budget of a clinical study, whether it's coming from a CRO or a central lab or any other clinical vendor. And we all know that due diligence in clinical outsourcing, it's not only time consuming and exhaustive, but it's extremely inaccurate because we are always in a game of mapping something with something else. So if the sponsor chooses to leverage the CRO native bid grids, so you get a proposal from CRO X and CRO Y and CRO Z, and they all come in different formats. Someone in the sponsor team is going to have to do the mapping, is going to try to match different buckets, see what activities are included, are meetings included in vendor management or in project management or not, and try to match the 300 plus lines that you typically see on a phase 2, phase 3 trial budget proposal. If instead the sponsor is at a different level of maturity and has its own standard bid grid, we all know there are no two sponsors that use the same standard unless they use Clinical Maestro. Then the CROs are in the mapping game, and they are trying to match the very nuanced activities and that originate from their costing tools to these different buckets. And everyone is working in an imprecise environment, which makes someone's due diligence, whether the sponsor or the CROs, extremely difficult. Now, we also know that these are lean times. There have been massive layoffs in the industry. The biotechs are suffering from the lack of funding. So it's not only the efficiency of using the systems or systems in general that matters. It's also the ability to scale, to do more with less people because there are less resources available. But now cost transparency is mission critical. So again, knowing how difficult it is to achieve that type of transparency, and that is not squeezing suppliers, is understanding the cost driver and the assumptions are key components that make due diligence very difficult. Now, if you go deeper into not only the budget numbers, but what I like to call peeling the onion, and peeling the onion is correlating budget to assumptions, service assumptions, timeline assumptions, study-specific assumptions, then this correlation is absolutely non-trivial. So having mechanisms that at least highlight variances or that can suggest the types of questions or areas where one should focus to achieve that level of transparency it's again mission critical. And it's not about awarding the lowest cost budget. And I think CROs should never focus on bidding at the lowest. It is about achieving the optimal cost budget that also includes potential amendments or changes that might come along the way. And the final point that I want to make, that it's not only related to the sourcing process with RFPs, but also with RFIs and vendor management. It's our human ability to analyze responses. I know there are a number of vendors in the audience today, and we are subjected to responding to questionnaires all the time, and they come in different solutions, typically generic Q&A type solutions. But most of them come in Excel and in Word, and it takes enormous amount of time to respond as a service provider. But more importantly, in the due diligence process, it takes enormous time to compare. Say that you sent an RFI to 10 different suppliers and you ask 10 questions. Here you have 100 responses to analyze, and you have less resources in your team to do the analysis. Then how are you really going to detect risk? And how are you going to be ahead of the game if you truly want to save costs, become more efficient, and prevent risk? So these are some of the takeaways. Of course, we can have a webinar just talking about this. But Andrei, can AI solve some of these challenges? And is AI good at doing this type of analysis?
I think it's uniquely positioned at this because it excels at pattern recognition in messy, semi-structured or unstructured data. And I'm talking not just about the recent wave of what's called generative AI, but also more traditional, if you can call them that, machine learning techniques, which were present for several years already. But a lot of the AI, let's say, topics got much more interested once they became commercial at scale with tools like ChatGPT. And in principle, the generative systems are very good at summarizing data and generating content, either based on existing content or simply based on their training. So I think they're uniquely positioned to this. And I think everyone, I suspect, got excited with this, especially in industries such as clinical outsourcing. But then this leads me to the question of why haven't we seen any success stories yet? So if we bring up the screen again, I'd like to talk a bit about some of these pointers. And I think it all revolves around the idea that garbage in results in garbage out. So in principle, I see two types of problems, and this is also something I think we've been asked at conferences, or we've seen people do. They essentially throw in their whole PDF or BitGrid Excel into ChatGPT or similar market tool, which they're great for brainstorming or content drafting because they're essentially a next token or word predictor. But because it's a general purpose model, and because it has a context limitation, which they grow over time, but it's still limited, it's going to miss critical nuance, structure, or it's going to miss or make things up. So in our experience, they can work well for smaller files, content, but they get lost when they have to iterate over thousands of activities and lots of data. So that's kind of the general context problem, and this problem exists with other applications of AI, for example, in generating code for applications when they have to parse through existing code bases. The other part, which I think is unique to clinical outsourcing, is that it doesn't know the structure of your sourcing events. It doesn't know what a rate card is, what the study specification are, what a CRF page is, and it lacks domain-specific knowledge and also the structure of that knowledge into your specific system. So I think all of these combined lead to a lack of good results with existing market tools. And the third part, I think, is also the interface, because even if you have a system for outsourcing, or even if you don't, you still rely on the sort of existing interfaces which are outside of your day-to-day work. So that's what I had sort of in my thinking around why haven't we seen any success stories yet. So Anca, any comment on that? Like, how does it seem from your part?
Yeah, I know we've also tried for our own experiment, throwing sourcing data at Copilot or any other tool. And there are very specific nuances, and it's very important for this audience to get educated on the importance of the data structure. If the data is not standardized, if the taxonomy is not clear, if there is no association between an assumption, which may be a cost driver of number of units, or it can drive effort, for example, in the number of hours. If there is no standardization in nomenclature, or at least a way to map that project management means the same as managing projects, but is not the same as managing sites, for example. It's not just pattern recognition that we are looking at here. We are looking at very deep knowledge of clinical outsourcing that it's being applied to a solution in order to not hallucinate, and in order to interpret the data correctly. And with Clinical Maestro, we have an important advantage, which is a data mold. We've been accumulating blinded proposal data for the last 5 years or more, and we now are sitting on the largest blinded proposal database, and we've seen every possible structure, I think, Andrei, and that, well, not every possible. There are still out there that we have not seen, but we know how messy, how unstructured the data is, and in order to interpret it and analyze it, standardization is absolutely mission critical. So I think this is the reason why AI was not successful in outsourcing, because there aren't a lot of systems other than us that I know of that actually has this amount of data and this amount of domain expertise in a tool that's actually fit for purpose. So what's our secret sauce, actually? We're not going to spill the secret sauce. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good. I think that's a good segue to how we approach this, because, as you said, we have this structured data. We already have a SaaS tool for budgeting for outsourcing. We're going to talk a bit at the end how we are planning on standardizing clinical outsourcing data on a more general purpose, but specifically for what we have today. This is a high-level view of how we approached it. So what we're going to show today is the Maestro bot, which is a tool for outsourcing people to do due diligence on clinical RFPs. So its interface is a chatbot, and we take the user's query. For example, they might ask to compare the vendor timelines and the proposal, and instead of just throwing the whole proposal, which you might have multiple vendors and so on, into an AI system directly, we have multiple specialized agents that we developed. The first one is an intent router, and this essentially determines which downstream agents to route this query. So is the user asking about something related to the questions of the RFP? Is it the general information, or is it the specific information? Does it have to look in that area or this area? So that's sort of the role of the intent router. And then we have specialized analysis agents for different areas of the RFP, because especially with the budget information, you don't want to rely on generative AI necessarily for extracting that. It's usually not very good at math. It seems to give a response, but then if you actually dive into the details, you're going to see it's wrong. So we have specialized agents which don't rely on that for budget, but for other types of information, we have a leverage on generative AI. And all of this is on top of our structured data layer with the specialized knowledge and document repository. And this is how you can get useful answers from the chatbot. And this is just the first iteration. So this, of course, will evolve based on user feedback, as well as new model advances, because we built it in a way in which, if a new model is performing better at some of these activities, we can plug in that one instead of what we're using right now.
Okay, so can we see the bot? And while you are getting ready to do the demo, just wanted to set expectations again. We are going to look at an RFP first, so you can understand the structure as it is now in a SaaS system. Then there are some simulated answers from different vendors. And then we are going to turn on the bot to analyze the proposals. We do want you to participate in this. So please ask us questions. I'm actually not seeing questions in here, so I don't know why you are so quiet.
They're coming
you are?
through. I'm checking.
You are coming through? Oh, for some reason, I'm not seeing. It seems to be working. Yeah. Okay, then maybe I need to put my glasses on. Just wanted to reiterate, ask us questions, ask bot the question. Hopefully the bot will be able to answer. Of course, you are lacking the specific context of the RFP, but let's play with it as much as possible and let's make it interactive. One more thing before going, I know we have a number of CROs in the audience, and the CROs are, in general, clinical service providers who submit proposals are such a key component of this exercise. So I want to highlight that there are many use cases for you. What you will be getting into today, it's more of the sneak peek view of what the sponsor will do with the proposal that you submit. And that's very important because what we all want to achieve is higher transparency, cost savings, and standardization that will benefit the entire industry. So have in mind that what you are seeing today is the sponsor view, so it gives you a better understanding of how you would be using the system. At the same time, of course, you can use the system to source yourself, for example, for third-party proposals and more. And we'll have a separate, more CRO-focused discussion at some point. But now this is primarily for the sponsors. So sponsors, let's see the bot in action.
Yeah, so let's pull up the screen. Okay, so this is Clinical Maestro. Again, a lot of people probably haven't seen it before, so I'll give a very brief tour. So bear with me for around 5 minutes while I'll set the context, because I think this is important for what we'll show with the AI chatbot. But at the top, we have different modules. I'm in Source, which is the clinical outsourcing modules, and I have a number of sourcing events, which can be RFIs, RFPs, various types of RFX, let's call them. So we're going to focus on this DRM Phase 2 RFP. And if I'm going to open it, I'm just going to show a bit the structure of the RFP. So we have an overview page, which includes the sourcing team from the sponsor and how they're involved in notifications and scoring. And here's where you can add details to the vendor and instructions for completing the RFP. We have
this is essentially the cover page of, let's say, a Word
exactly.
RFP that you would have had, but it's digitized. Obviously, it's configurable to your needs, but this is essentially your typical first page of a Word RFP. Yeah.
Then we have the sourcing timelines, which of course you can customize before sending this out, and you can display them in a Gantt chart form as well. If it's a study-specific RFP, you can add details about the study, like what's the design, what's the objectives, what's the synopsis or protocol documents that you can attach here, indication, TA, and so on. And finally, in one of the larger sections is where we have the operational plan and the specifications for the study, which the important item to take away here is that these are standardized, so we have them replicated per each location and aggregated then at the study level. You can control whether the vendor can change or they have to bid to spec, essentially, on these.
What I would also highlight in here is the data structure, because as you know, when you have a Word RFP, and this is the RFP, not the proposal from the vendor, of course, you tend to have different tables in. These are the patients, these are the sites. You may or may not give regional location. You may or may not give specification on location, let's say at the cohort level. And the information may be in Word, or it can be an Excel table, multiple Excel tables of different formats. The beauty of Maestro is obviously putting the data in a structured fashion, so you can not only analyze it because it's structured, it's easy to compare across studies, it's easy to compare across different RFPs for different events, or when you go back to the proposals, it's easy to compare the vendor data over time, because the data always comes in the same structure, that it's analyzable, it's reproducible, and it's designed for or prone to be used with artificial intelligence. And this goes on and on. We're not going to go on every tab on the
I would just highlight visits. That, under services, basically, you select the scope of services to which the vendor will bid to. And what you see here at the RFP level, this is not what the vendor submitted. This is actually a benchmark, which is estimated by the system prior to sending the proposal, using the market intelligence that Clinical Maestro has under the hood. One other thing I would highlight at the RFP level is that we also have a qualitative side, so you can add different templates for questions that you ask to for the vendor, which you use to qualify them. So I'm just checking the comments, see if there's anything new. I think we should just go to the bot. Let's not lose any more time. So as Anca said, this proposal already has 3 responses, so I can go here and actually check the 3 responses. There aren't 3 fictive vendors, of course. They were already scored by the sponsor team. Now, we prepared these responses a bit with some personas in mind. So the first vendor, Similux, is a bit of a typical large CRO, which has good financial stability. They have a large team, and they're also more expensive and, let's say, slower. Product Clinical is the startup CRO. They rely a lot on new tech, but are newer and newer overall to the market. And the third one is somewhere in the middle. So again, in Maestro, we already have a lot of tools for proposal due diligence. So you can, for example, select the 3 proposals and compare them, and you'll have a detailed comparison around the operational assumptions that were submitted by the vendors across timelines, patients, sites, and so on. Of course, also on the budget, and this includes an overall perspective from the top level across the main categories, but you can also dive into details on each category to the line item level. And you can also access this type of comparison on the qualitative side, so you can compare what each vendor responded to questions and so on. And this is where I would do a segue to the bot, because even if you have this standardized comparison that you can export, you can do additional analysis on. It's still, especially on long text answers, quite difficult to analyze this. And we have just 12 questions here, and you can see the volume of responses. So this is where I can launch Maestro bot from this top menu header. We have a history of the conversations that I had with it here. I can access some suggested prompts, or I can specifically ask it to summarize vendor responses to questions, for example. It is context aware, so it knows that I'm on a comparison for this RFP where we have those 3 vendors, so it knows exactly where to summarize those from. You don't have to specifically tell it that, hey, I'm here or I'm there. And as always with live demos, sometimes you have to try again. So let me try and rewrite that. Questions across the 3 vendors, let's say. And what this does is now it's going to use that qualitative agent behind the scenes, and it will access the responses from the database for these proposals and summarize those. So as you can see, it took all of the questions one by one and provided a response for or summarization for each of the 3 vendors. You can see clearly from the personas that I put in there that they are reflected, because this is also a way that we tested the qualitative side. And when there was no difference, they basically it just listed that the vendors had the same responses, essentially. Now, there's also a separate section here, which is the additional information, where essentially we allow space for the vendors to put in their general proposal information, presentation of the company, and other areas which do not fit, let's say, in the rest of the proposal. So as you can imagine, this has a lot of information, usually even more than question responses. So I can ask it to also summarize this. So summarize additional information provided by the 3 vendors.
Hey, and do we have anyone in the audience suggesting questions here? That would be good.
Yeah, I love to test it out with that.
Yes. So don't be shy or quiet. Okay. I love this type of summaries because we all know we are so very busy during the day. And I remember when I used to get the proposals, let alone I would never get them in a system. They'll come by email with 50 different attachments, and you would download the mini novel of a proposal. And we all know how much work it goes into it. But oftentimes, leading outsourcing, I would go to a bid defense meeting and see my own team members browsing through the answer live in the meeting because they didn't have time to read it, let alone compare the different proposals. And this does no service to the CRO, who has put so much effort and energy in producing these most valuable documents that never get read. So to me, the work that we are doing with AI here is groundbreaking, because it's trying to, at the very least, bring awareness and essence to the analysis, so you can then go back and actually do more reading. But everybody's trying to get the news summaries, everything in a summarized format, because we live such intense and busy lives. So to see this in outsourcing, it's quite exciting. And here we have a comment. I do need to put the glasses on.
Yeah, so it's great now. These show up on the screen.
Good. So what's the average response time for the chatbot responses on these complex bids?
So it's usually around 5 seconds, and it can, depending on the complexity of the query. So if it has to search in a lot of information in a lot of areas, then that can increase to maybe 10 seconds or something like this. We are, of course, this was longer when we first started this out, so it could get past 30 seconds. We are constantly trying to reduce this. But I think now, as you can see, it sort of becomes a bit conversational, so I don't, feel like I need to go grab a coffee before it responds, so I can basically do it live. One other thing I would highlight, Anca, to that is that, especially for people working on executive summaries, I have something to show about that towards the end, but you can just copy responses from the proposal, from the interactions with the chatbot, and paste them in an email or in a different document that you're using on the RFP analysis.
So let's do, okay, it's another question. Given that the AI hallucinates, what is the level of accuracy here and how can we trust it? Okay, we touched on this before. It does hallucinate when it's lacking context, but the AI that we are using is built in our solution that has structured data and the largest proposal data bank in the industry. So it may still hallucinate a little bit. I don't think much as we've been doing testing because it is trained on the specific vocabulary, nomenclature, and data structure of clinical outsourcing. And I don't know, Andrei, if you want to comment on this.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So as Anca said, with generative AI, I think with the current models, at least, there's always a risk of hallucination. So what we're trying to do is minimize it as much as possible. That's why, especially on the budget, that's where we found the greatest risk. We try to not rely on generative AI when you don't need to rely on generative AI. So, for example, if you basically want to add two numbers together to get a sum, then we already have functions for that which are non-hallucinatory. So we know it works. They can be tested. So, as much as possible, when we don't need to use generative AI, we don't. So we have some technical parts which are essentially directly executing queries in the database and getting the data from there, and we use basically AI on top for presenting the results to the user. So AI here we're trying to use it more for understanding the user intent, and then applying the non-generative tools on top of that to get a result, and then using generative AI again back to present the results to the user. So this is how we've seen improvements around this, but this is, of course, a technology which is still, I think, in early. We will see how new models evolve, and we also have a feedback option. So if you don't like the response, we are actually looking for feedback on this. Once we have it out for clinical Maestro users, we can adapt it based on the feedback that we get into the response. That's what I would add to that.
And one more thing, and then let's ask about more questions. One more thing I wanted to say that, again, the bot is not looking to respond to information or create responses from the World Wide Web. It's limited to reading the information of the 3 proposals that were submitted in a standardized format in Clinical Maestro. So it's not about data leaking out. It's a high level of safety and security when operating the tool. Nothing of this is spilling back to the World Wide Web or is used to produce an answer to a question. So let's maybe ask more specific questions here, Andrei. Like, let's ask about assumptions. Go ahead. I was going to ask questions.
You can ask it to compare the vendor timelines, for example. And this is going to trigger another agent, which looks at timeline data. One other thing while this works that I would add on the hallucination part is that, so now it responded before I finished. So that's I think, a good highlight of the response time. So basically this pulled in the timelines for the RFP. And when in testing this, we always check the raw data behind the scenes. So it's we essentially cross-check it across hallucination all the time. I think one of the other challenges with this type of technology, which I think we'll have more feedback on initially, is did it understand correctly the user's intent? Because if it doesn't understand correctly the user intent, then it basically goes to another area and it doesn't retrieve your correct result. I think that's sort of a more immediate thing that we're working on getting as good as possible outside of the risk of hallucination. So that's something that I would add to that comment there.
So one thing that we've been also doing, and Andrei knows because I asked this question obsessively, which of the CROs has the highest or the lowest project management cost and why? And then we kept asking, and why? And I don't know if you guys were that happy with me asking the question why. It's because there's no simple answer to the question why. Is it because of more timelines, more cost per hour, activities included or not included in scope of work, maybe budget line items left blank? So the peeling the onion, as I said at the beginning, it's non-trivial in outsourcing. So maybe let's ask the board a question related to that. And then I see Cesar has another question too on the meeting. So let's do maybe some cost diving on whatever, biggest, largest site monitoring.
Let's ask it a generic question first. So by analyzing let's say the cost of the free vendors, what can you suggest for cost optimization, for example? And the other thing that I would highlight here is that the questions are also aware of the existing conversation. So basically at the end of this analysis, you can ask it, okay, what do you recommend me to do with this? What other additional questions can I get? Can I ask these vendors and so on? So it sort of has awareness on the proposal itself. So here, let me make this bigger. It basically gathered in the total cost for each of the vendors, and also automatically summarized the average hours for each of the proposals. So you basically see that Synology puts a lot more, or estimates a lot more effort in the proposals, and then it results into some cost optimization suggestions based on this. So this is an example on some higher level question, but we can also dive in deeper, and let's ask it specifically about project management. Has the largest project management.
Before you click, before you ask the bot, just wanted to highlight some of the things here, again, coming from the context of a person that has done outsourcing for many, many years. It takes really significant effort, and all of you here watching this webinar will recognize to detect different nuances in here. For example, the looking at the same time at the rate card and the total cost. We tend, because we don't have time, to look the proposal side by side, as you saw us doing it without AI, and saying, okay, vendor A is less $1 million. Yes, but have you looked at the pass-through costs? Are the costs allocated in the same bucket? Where should you focus? We can ask a question like, where is the area with the largest variance? It's infinite number of questions that you can ask, but I want to point out that by answering a question like this, when you are looking at a proposal that may have embedded a budget in PDF or separately in an Excel, and you are looking at 2 or 3 vendors, or even just your preferred vendor against the agreed negotiated rates or fixed units, is a daunting task. So it's very relevant in terms of the direction that we are trying to go and the efficiencies that you can achieve, being able to query the data very easily, and looking at different recommendations, which can be general, specific, so on and so forth. I think Cesar has a question and says, can this type of agentic system also be implemented in other modules of Clinical Maestro, such as Vision? Can this RFP summarization be transferred to the survey evaluation vendor responses and accelerate that workflow? Cesar, wait for this, because we will have at the end, we're going to talk about what's coming next. So we'll come back to your question. Let's ask the board more questions on due diligence.
Maybe ask it around
project management. Here is my favorite subject.
And then I'm also going to segue to the executive summary, and maybe you can ask it some general recommendation based on this discussion, like, you know, what follow-up questions do I need to ask each of the vendors. So it pulled up the project management costs. In this case, it identified the service. So this is within clinical study management, and it basically did an auto analysis unprompted based on the results there. So again, we can ask it, you know, what's the total number of hours involved in project management and so on related to this.
Okay, so why does Cinelex has higher costs? You said he's the bigger CRO in the room here.
Yeah. They basically have a higher number of effort, and this actually shows from the previous analysis because they had the largest number of hours. So for example, we can ask it as well what vendor has the highest number of unit hours
in
for
project management.
Yeah, for example.
Okay, also a driver would potentially be the number of months. So it's, again, you can go reiteratively to detect why.
Yeah.
And okay, here it is some recommendations for optimization and the reason for having higher or lower number of hours in here.
I think we have a question.
Okay, Priya. Hi, Priya. Does this have the capability of reviewing and summarizing SOPs from the 3 bids? SOPs, if you ask the question about SOP, so this must be a question that you ask the vendor, and they must respond to the question in the system. So I don't see why not.
Or they may provide it, for example, as an additional information. So if you specifically leave some instructions for the vendor to give you details for their operating procedures, then yes, you can then ask a question specifically around that. Yeah.
Maybe, I know we have 10 minutes left, which is not a lot of time. Do we want to, I mean, let me ask you, what do we want to show next? I want to make sure we leave some, we answer Cesar's question and that we have a bit of discussion on some other projects.
Show another area. So besides the chatbot, we are generating an executive summary for the RFPs, the proposals you receive in the RFPs, which essentially has everything from an executive summary to key financial metrics to their operational approach, details around the vendor. So it summarizes some of the information that I already accessed in the bot, and provides some considerations around their strengths, weaknesses, as well as recommendations. And of course, you can basically copy this from here and put it into a report or use it in your analysis. This is essentially using the same engine as I showed previously, but it's basically asking the questions already. So when you have proposals coming in, this is automatically generated, and then once you get into a comparison like this between the vendors, then you're able to access it directly without going through the bot.
And Andrei, we are doing a comparison right now on a specific RFP that has 3 vendor responses. But if you wanted to do a comparison of, say, Cinelex across the last 2 proposals they sent, could the bot handle historical data? Because in my experience in outsourcing management, especially when you have preferred relationships, the absolute best comparator point in a negotiation is the CRO's or the vendor own historical data. So if, Cinelex would have submitted for a similar budget $3 million instead of $2 million in proposals, and the AI detected that, okay, given that you peel the onion to ask why, ultimately this is the best negotiating tool with the vendors, because they always argue on the benchmark data. We know benchmark data that we have in our database is 95% accurate, but they always tend to go and say, oh, that's not how we operate. But if the AI can do historical data analysis of the same proposals over time, and I know we are playing and testing that, can you comment a bit more on it?
Yeah, so right now it works on, it's prompted, so you have to ask it, and it works on existing proposals. So what you can do is, if you have multiple RFPs that Cinelex was involved in, you can basically choose to compare the proposals just from Cinelex, and this is something you can do in Source, and then ask or open the bot specifically based on that, and it will respond based on that information. You can even give it some context that, hey, these are all from this vendor, so I'm doing this historical analysis. So it does work like that, and I'm curious to see it used in that way. What it doesn't do right now, it doesn't automatically and unprompted, when you're basically reviewing a proposal where Cinelex, or let's say a specific vendor was involved, doesn't automatically search in the past to see what other data about Cinelex doesn't have. We'll have to see exactly how we can make that work and what are the challenges with that.
And Christina, hi, she has a question, and she wants to have the slide deck done at the end of the year. Summary looks like. Can we do that, Andrei?
Yeah, I think the responses anyway should be generated in Markdown format. So I think we should just be able to copy some of these to, like these ones, to Excel, and it should work automatically. But we do have to do some more testing on that. But yeah, that's something definitely we will explore.
Okay, we have 7 minutes on the webinar. Any more questions from the audience, or Andrei, what else do you want to show before we kind of wrap up?
I think on the bot, I kind of showed what I wanted to show. So I would basically do like a wrap up on what we're going to focus on next. And this is anyway coming in very soon in the June release. So I want to talk a bit about what are kind of the next steps on top of this, besides improving it based on feedback from people. So
maybe let's take away the screen. Let's do a little recap of what you've seen so far. So you've seen the first ever bot for clinical outsourcing, and hopefully we explained why it's so complex, why it has taken quite some time for us to actually figure out the different agents that can help do analysis. And let's say the grade is not finished high school yet, right? Let's say it's still in middle school. And we are going to be releasing it in June. We hope that many of you will use it, will give us feedback. And I actually can't imagine doing due diligence without something like this, honestly. As an outsourcing person, it can make everyone's life so much easier, but it takes a lot of work and refinement to get where we are and to get to where we will be in the next webinar when we'll be showing that maybe in a couple of months from now on. So hopefully you got a little bit of at least a flavor. I wish you guys ask more questions from the bot. But I also want to highlight some of the things that we are focusing on parallel. And since, these webinars are running so quickly, it's so much we can cover in one. So Andrei, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the AI direction and projects that we have in the pipeline? We have 20 plus that we are constantly trying to prioritize. But directionally, and Cesar, that is going to answer your question too.
Yeah, so I think maybe if we can pull up the screen really quickly, I have some examples. And I actually wanted to show this into the webinar today, but Anca caught me, said we won't have time to also show this because we have a prototype for this as well. And you were right, Anca, we wouldn't have time for this as well. But I think that one of the points we're looking at is how can you extract unstandardized data from things like rate cards, bid grids, RFP templates, make them standardized, and then once they're standardized, you can map to other data sources, because in clinical outsourcing, everyone maps something to something else. And this is also the friction point sometimes with CROs if they have to use a system for bidding. It happens also in clinical Maestro. You have to basically, because we use structured data, you have to map to the structure that the system expects. So in my view, and the ultimate goal is that should be translated, if not 100%, at least 90% automatically. So this is one big piece that we're looking at. And the other thing, and this comes to related to this, is that especially for early stage biotechs, which don't have a lot of templates, we can generate this based on both past examples, specialized knowledge, as well as industry templates. So if you don't have a template for a rate card, here's one. If you don't have a template for bid grid for IRT, for example, here's a template, which again is not hallucinated, is based on some pre-existing knowledge. And finally, and this is,
I just wanted to say something on this, because
sorry.
in Clinical Maestro, you can already configure yours, assuming that you know what you want, and it comes with some pre-configured templates. So today, if you are already an outsourcing pro, and you have crafted over the last 15 years a very complex template, we will say, oh God, try to simplify it a little bit, but nevertheless, let's put it in Maestro. So you can achieve this level of configuration, or you can try using some out-of-the-box models that we have built. But suggesting with AI is something different, because it's a different level of interaction. Of course, you can go and pull a setup template at any point in time, but it's more the interaction of the user during the RFP building process, right, Andrei? It's like, suggest me another questions. Are these questions okay? Have I missed any question? Does the template miss anything? So
if you don't have a template, for example, that's
or if I don't, suggest a template for an IRT RFP with AI, because you just don't have it. And of course, you have the ability to then store it and further configure it. But I like to say, and I did it when I was putting the presentation for this webinar, that the AI tools are not going to take your job away, are going to make outsourcing managers superhumans. It's having an intelligent assistant that
an additional brain, essentially.
An additional brain, exactly, that it's there at your fingertips. So that's on the content generation. And this actually further expands into exactly what you are going to talk about it now. because it extends to creating RFIs, or let's say you do a category reevaluation. And you want to be looking at the questions that you might have asked in the past. But Andrei is going to talk about something that I'm actually very excited about. So,
yeah, so I think Cesar asked a question about vision, where the primary focus of that is vendor management. And that is one of the priorities of extending the AI capabilities on. And besides summarizing information for vendor evaluations, which I think is a very low-hanging fruit there, I think what I'm more excited about is taking this a bit more proactive, because what I showed is still on the reactive side. So you have to, get answer. You have to prompt the chatbot. You have to basically interact with it. But especially in vision, we see it used a lot for storing governance documents, governance information, meeting minutes you have with your vendors. And that's, I think, one of the areas where things get lost. So what if it can basically suggest that, hey, I saw that in this governance meeting with the vendor, you said that the vendor needs to do something, or that the sponsor needs to do something, but that isn't tracked in the action item tracker, so it's going to be lost. So what if it can suggest that, hey, I think you should add these in the action tracker automatically. So this is just with internal data. There's a lot of vendor information and intelligence in the public domain as well, which can be used for risk management, but specifically for information and vision. I think this is one of the next directions.
So we are past the hour. We can still take a few questions.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to ask a daring question, here we are. Challenge us. No one. Okay, that's a quiet group. I'm surprised because there were more than 100 joining. Hey, but if you have a question, it's not like you don't know our LinkedIn profile. So ask me maybe the domain expert questions, and ask Andrei the technical questions. And thank you so much for joining today. I'm super excited about the direction that the entire industry is taking. I think you should be very excited too. I saw a lot of people being very skeptical and apprehensive about the usage of AI in anything, and I'm telling the naysayers, change your mind, because in a couple of years from now, or maybe even same time next year, your job is going to have an AI component one way or another. And I think this music is telling me to shut down. Is that the case? Guys, thank you so much for joining. Andrei, any final words? Because we're going to hear rock and roll next.
No, thanks everyone for joining, and I'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next one. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.